Hey, good morning, church. I pray all is well with you this Friday morning. I'm going to be walking through 2 Corinthians chapter 11. Now, don't forget about what was talked about in chapter 10, and thank you, Ron, for the setup for that continues in chapter 11, where he's really addressing false teaching, false teachers that have come into the church. But it's required him also to defend his own apostleship and his teachings. And so he kind of starts off telling them about there's the simplicity of the gospel, and sometimes people come in and try to add into it, trying to make it more than what it is, because sometimes they say, well, this is just too easy, and Paul addresses that early in the chapter. But he talks about it as a place of love that he has for the church. And now, then later on in the chapter, he begins to talk about these false apostles, or these false teachers that were coming in. A lot of them were doing it for money and to gain wealth and power. And he certainly addresses that and defends himself on the way that he represented Christ whenever he was with them in Corinth, and about how he didn't take money from them. By the way, there are false teachers out there today that are the same way, that are taking a gospel and they're teaching a false teaching, and they are doing it for money as well. So we see the same thing going on today. But then at the end of the chapter 11, I love what Paul does as he compares himself to these false teachers. And he talks about all that he has gone through for the gospel of Christ. And it's always been a challenge to me to read this section, because I think of all that Paul went through to get the gospel and the churches started, and the gospel to the Gentiles, and the work that went on and that Paul personally went through. But I'll start reading some of this to you. It's in verse number 23. It says, "Are they ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool. I am more. In labors more abundant, with stripes above measure, in prison more frequently, in deaths often." And he starts talking about, from here on in verse number 24, all the things that he has gone through, Paul, for the gospel. In verse number 24, he says, "For from the Jews 5 times I've received 40 stripes minus 1. 3 times I've been beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. Night and day I have been in the deep. In journeys often, in perils of waters, in perils of robbers, in perils of my own countrymen, in perils of the Gentiles, in perils from the cities, in perils of the wilderness, in perils of the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness and in toil, in sleeplessness often, in hunger and in thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness, besides all the other things that come upon me daily." And then I love what he says right here. He talks about all this pain that he has gone through. And then he says, "My deep concern for all the churches," this burden that he has for all the churches. And then he gets down in verse number 30. He talks about if he's going to boast in anything, and he sums it up in verse number 31. If he's going to boast in anything, he said, "The God of my Father, of our Lord Jesus Christ, who is blessed forever." You see, Paul endured a lot to get us the gospel. And if you are a servant of Christ and you're out preaching the gospel, you'll go through hard and difficult times. Just know that Christ is with you and will be with you and will give you strength enough for today to get through whatever you're going through. May God bless. Enjoy 2 Corinthians chapter 11. Look forward to seeing you on Sunday morning as we come together to worship the Lord. Take care.